Hello and welcome to the Empowered Couples Podcast, where here you get modern, non-boring relationship advice for you and your partner to communicate like pros, fight smarter, and stay on the same team no matter the challenge that you face. I'm one of your hosts, Aaron Freeman.
And I'm Jocelyn Freeman, but you all just know us as the Freemans.
And this episode is about how to be the happiest couple you know by following 3 traits of the happiest people on earth.
Who are the happiest people on earth, Aaron?
Well, it's the Americans, right?
Probably
No,
not.
not even close. We'll get it more into that, but the happiest people on earth over a long period of time has actually been the Danish people. Now, if you're listening, you think, where are the Danish people from?
I know, sometimes I'm like, wait, Danish people are from
Denmark. So they had been number one for a stretch of 40 years in a row.
That's no joke.
That's really saying something. Now, over the past 10 years, it has went back and forth between Denmark, Norway, and even Finland. And Finland's been the number one over the past 4 years. But where are all those countries located, by the way? In the same region.
Right.
They're all Icelandic countries.
They're doing something
the
right.
The interesting thing about that is these places are cold. They're dark a lot of the time of year, and they don't necessarily have the lowest taxes. So it's like these are not necessarily the things that lead towards happiness, which is funny because you think about here in the United States, it's like, oh, let's live in California, live in Florida, live where it's nice. That doesn't have a lot to do with actual happiness. So where this comes from, as you probably imagine, we're reading a lot of books on parenting, and one that we've been reading is called The Danish Way of Parenting, actually by Jessica Alexander and Iben Sandal. And what we realized is that a lot of these traits about raising a happy child have so much to do with how you can be a happy partner, a happy individual. So we want to talk about some of the biggest traits that we took away from this book in particular. And one thing I just want to say that really stood out: if you raise happy children can turn into happy adults, and then happy adults raise happy kids when they have kids themselves. And so it really perpetuates. Like, how could a country be 40 years in a row, and then from there be between 1 and 2 for like 60 years? It's because of this cycle. And so it's more so about these inherent traits than a lot of the other things we might think lead to happiness. And by the way, America is number 19, and we've never broken the top 10. So if we want our lives and our relationships to be happy, we can't say that we're necessarily doing it right, at least from a country standpoint. So we really want to cover today these traits from the Icelandic countries, from Denmark in particular, and see what we can do in our own lives and relationships here.
And our marriages, and really how to have a happy home. Really quick before we go into that content, a couple reminders. Soon we'll be on quote unquote maternity leave when baby Sky comes. And we actually are creating some goodies, some gifts for you guys while we're off. So you're going to want to stay plugged into future episodes when we announce some of those. We wanted to make sure we had resources for you while we're snuggling our newborn. So just stay plugged into both the podcast and our Instagram, and we'll announce those gifts. And the second thing is we have the parenting web class this week, November 10th, with the trainer, Amy McCready. She is one of the world's leading parenting experts, and she is going to help you with many of the challenges that you face, both in your parenting strategies, like even how to handle discipline or how to get your kids to listen without nagging or yelling, and how to have it not impact your partnership as well. So make sure you take advantage of that. Again, it is November 10th. It is this week. And go to onlinecouplesworkshops.com/parenting. And that /parenting is important because that's the webpage for her specific web class. Can't wait to see you all there.
Oh, yeah. It's going to be great.
Yes.
So let's dive in here too. It's really interesting if you think about this, that where does happiness actually come from? And it really more so is the particular traits in how we interact with one another. Now, of course, we are talking about marriage and relationships. So your happiness comes more so from the inherent way in which you interact with your partner.
So it's not about all the money. It's not about a bigger house. It's not the cars.
It's not about living by a beach. It's not about having a boat. It's not about the temperature being warm.
Those are nice. Like, I like to think of those as the sprinkles on top.
Yeah.
I mean, and just as an example, like we talk to couples all day long, and there are some who are very, very successful from an outward perspective. Huge homes, cars. And when we check in on their marriage, a lot of times it's depleted of love, connection, joy between them because they're working a ton to live the lifestyle that they have. And their relationship, to your point, their interactions with each other aren't full of joy. So it isn't just the things you accumulate and achieve from an outward perspective.
Yeah, and I mean, it is true. And I have heard people, say that. And I don't know, I have something about not putting it on like, oh, well, none of the super wealthy are actually happy. Well, if you really think of it, I mean, America is number 19. So it doesn't matter. No one is that happy from a general perspective in the United States. Mm-hmm. So it's not, I don't want to just put that on the wealthy, like, oh, they have all this wealth and then they're not happy. People with no money or even middle class, they're not happy. So to your point, it's really not about the outward accumulation of anything or where you live. These can add to the comforts of life for sure. So what are these particular traits? Well, again, this is coming from the book, The Danish Way of Parenting, which is about obviously parenting kids, but 3 traits that stood out to us that were huge for bringing into a marriage to be the happiest couple you know. Number 1 is reframing. Number 2, empathy. And number 3, togetherness.
Yeah, and these are 3 that we're going to dive into because I think they are things to easily forget or not even bring your attention to. So Aaron, you're really great at reframing. I think this is actually something you are very skilled at in life. Do you want to describe the trait of reframing?
Oh, sure. Thanks for saying that. Reframing is, to me, at its basis about changing your perspective. So we get upset, or you get upset with your partner because the way they say something they did, something that they said they were going to do, but they didn't do, how they speak to you, maybe something that hasn't got fully repaired, a disagreement about how to parent. Obviously, all these things are what we're talking about in our web class with Amy, as well as the secret one we have coming up. So something happens, and then there's a way in which you are currently seeing it in the moment. Reframing is about being able to take a pause and to change the perspective on how you initially saw that, we'll call it an event. And what's interesting about this, a couple of main things that I think allow someone to do that is, first of all, to expand your timeline.
So when you say expand your timeline, you mean not just focusing right on this moment now, but like the broader perspective of the month or the year? Is that what you mean? Yeah,
we'll give an example here for couples, but let me give the example from a book from a kid's perspective. So there was like a little girl and a boy. They were playing with a toy, and the little boy took the toy from the girl. She goes back to her parents and says, "Oh, Jimmy's really a mean kid." So the parent, the Danish parent, not an American parent, because an American parent would probably, stomp over there and grab the toy back and say, "This is my daughter's, don't do that." So the Danish way, and the way to reframe, is they just listened to the little daughter and said, "Oh, well, definitely understand. How do you feel about that?" Right? So she's like, "Oh, I feel upset." And they said, "Well, was Jimmy mean last week?" And the little daughter was like, "Well, no." So like, "Oh, so Jimmy's not a mean kid." And she was like, "Oh, well, no." So right there, right? That's just the first example of reframing. And to my point, expanding your timeline. When you're thinking so narrowly into like the right now, then we can get really fixated on that our perspective that's happening right in this moment is the only perspective. So I think a part of reframing is to see the larger timeline, whether that's a few days, a few weeks, or when it comes to relationship, expand it out to a few years. That's why we talk about having a couple's vision statement, is because it gives you a reframe for the entire life, why you are together. And when you do that, it's like, oh, you could start to either see this event as how this might benefit you, or at least even change your perspective of the event by thinking a little bit more long term.
Yeah, two examples come to mind. Like on our coaching sessions, a lot of times we're doing two things. One, we're either walking them through a skill or an exercise, and or we're helping them change their perspective, because when you change your perspective, you change your actions. And one in particular, we talk about conflict a lot, right? It's something we are talented in. And there's a lot of times where people will focus on how conflict shouldn't be happening. I'm so frustrated this is happening again. We had a conflict this week. And to your point, did they have a conflict last week? No, last week was a good week. But they're so focused on, I'm so frustrated and annoyed right now. Then, and again, it's be a longer conversation, but we would say, what if you could see this conflict as something that's actually clarifying something for you?
Right.
And then it's like, okay. What if this conflict is giving you new awareness about something you both want or need in the relationship? Okay, that's different than this shouldn't be happening. Okay.
Yeah.
And so you can really change your perception of things that are happening to either something you're resisting, frustrated about, making it a bad thing in your mind, or how can I see this as a benefit? Mm-hmm. And then, so that's kind of a conflict example, but another example would be, let's say your partner is not being the most kind, they're being a little bit off today, maybe a couple days, and you could be so focused on right then, like, gosh, they're just not showing up for me. They're kind of being frustrating, annoying,
critical, nitpicking. But then this reframing would be like, I wonder what's going on for them now, because they weren't this way last week. Mm-hmm. And again, you're broadening your timeline to think about, they're not always this way. They are right now. So what is different for them now as opposed to what was going on last week? Mm-hmm. Which will be a perfect transition to the second trait. But before we move on, I just want to say we have to start to understand that just because in this moment we have a certain perception, it does not mean it's truth. Mm-hmm. It is not like 100% fact, and it's also not the only way you could choose to see this. We really do live like something happens, then I have this perception, which is not necessarily living like, oh, I am choosing this perception. It's like, oh, my partner is putting me down. They're disrespecting me. And that's just the way that it is. Like, that's my truth right now. And you have to understand there's many ways you could have seen this. It's because of beliefs and your subconscious that this particular perspective happened to jump up into your mind. That created this emotion, but you're held onto it so tightly like it's the truth. It's not. It's just the one that happened to come into your mind. So reframing is about looking at, can I bring another perspective forward here?
Yes.
And the one thing I do want to say about reframing, if you're listening to this, focus on yourself first. So because in a partnership, you really need to have the agreement to help each other reframe. So honestly, don't be listening to this and think to yourself, oh, this is so perfect. I'm going to help my partner be better at reframing.
And start coaching
them on, you have to take this
differently
on for yourself. You have to first use this with your partner. To your point, you can't just jump in, because if they come to you and share something that was partly upsetting, they're disappointed about, they have some energy and emotion around, and you try to reframe them.
Let me help you see this differently.
Yeah. Oh, no, that's not how it went. All of a sudden, you're back into, you're invalidating them. You're invalidating that this is the experience that they happen to be having, and it doesn't go well.
Yeah.
So you, number one, need to do this for yourself. Number two, of course, you're in a partnership. You want to help each other here. But you would have to have this be an agreement where you have permission to do that.
That is huge. Going into the second trait, which is empathy. Now, we've referred to this on different episodes, but we cannot talk about this enough. Human beings cannot discuss or be reminded of empathy enough, because it can be very easy to judge someone's emotions, to make it wrong, to resist, to get defensive. And so we have to constantly be reminding ourselves to choose to be empathetic. It really is a choice that you make. It doesn't often happen just by default or by accident. And so empathy is first accepting another's emotion, so in this context, your partner, accepting their emotions, and also helping them accept it for themselves. Like holding space for them, giving them the opportunity to process it, discover it, feel it. And so empathy isn't even about helping fix their emotions.
Totally.
Right? It's not, oh, you're feeling sad, let me make you feel better right now, which can actually make the person feel like what they're feeling is not okay. And so empathy is kind of just being with the emotion that's there. And
I think there's a certain acknowledgement that happens of the other that, this is what you're feeling right now, right? And I'm empathizing. Some think of sympathizing, which there is a slight little difference, but you need to first empathize of what they're going through, of what they're experiencing, and don't just make them feel bad for what they are feeling and what they're going through. And then, of course, because that leads to a feeling of like being invalidated. So the way I see this as a process, because I like processes. Processes? I'm not sure which one it is exactly. But if you start with reframing a situation for yourself, that brings you then to almost the opportunity. It creates the opportunity for you to then empathize with your partner. So first reframe, then you're going to have to focus on slowing down your responses, which we might call more reactions, right? To us, the immediate sort of response is really like a reaction. So slow that down so you do give yourself the opportunity to respond. Be more present. Don't be distracted with other things. Don't be on your phone. Don't be trying to finish an email or a text or being on Facebook on your phone. If you really want to empathize, it requires attention. And as much as maybe some of you out there or any of us think that we can quote unquote multitask, you really don't. You can switch your mind in like a few milliseconds to something, but you really can't do more than one thing at one time. And so empathy takes full attention on your partner. So being like actually present in this moment with your partner. And then that almost allows you to go into an outward focus. Like when I'm present, when your intention and attention is right here, you can start to almost move your awareness over to where your partner is rather than, where is it usually?
On yourself. What do I think about what they're saying? What are they saying that I don't see as valid?
So empathy really begins with shifting your focus outward to another rather than it being focused inward. And then the main thing with empathy, I think, is about seeing if you can create the same experience within yourself.
Which people would say, like, put yourself in their shoes.
Yeah, exactly. The difference I want to make there is putting yourself in their shoes lives like a nice idea, like it's an imagery. The importance of actually putting yourself in other shoes is that I'm able in this moment to feel. To empathize is that I can actually feel what you're feeling. So it's a body thing, not just a thing that you're thinking about. Like, I think I can put myself in their shoes.
And we're not saying like if they're sad, you need to force yourself to be sad. Or if they're mad, you now are taking on and absorbing that emotion and becoming mad. I think it's more so of like from a human level, you really can feel what it's like to feel that. Like, I have been there. I totally know what you mean. And I know it can feel really frustrating to be that. Like, you just can connect to them from a human level. Like, I get it. Like, I know it doesn't feel good to be in that position.
One thing it makes me think as well, when all of these things have come together, you're really present with your partner and you're empathizing. Because I do get your point. Some people would say, well, I don't want to feel mad when my partner's feeling mad. When you're empathizing, let's say you were sharing a place that you were mad or angry. When I'm hitting all these steps and I'm empathizing with you, guess what I'm actually empathizing with? Oh, it sounds like there was some fear or doubt that was there for you. I get this sense that you were kind of scared, right? Because the emotion, if you will, of anger, is more an expression. Like anger gets expressed, but where does it come from? It comes from a fear or a doubt or being scared or something like that. So when you're empathizing, yeah, of course, if your partner is like 100% at max level anger, like, oh, I'm not going to empathize and be angry too. No, when you're empathizing, you're actually feeling the source of where the expression is actually coming from.
That's huge. Yeah, with empathy, I love the point about slowing down because it really is a choice. And this is something you cannot be reminded of enough. So keep empathy in mind. Do you want to go to the third one?
And the third trait is togetherness.
Yes, and they have a Danish word that I love, and it's spelled Hygge, hygge. And it's a word that means a lot to them. It's about being together. Like they actually, in their language, would focus on, let's create hygge. Let's be together, right? And it's not just about, oh, we have dinner together and it's kind of this routine or, oh yeah, we're just together by default for Christmas. No, they actually want to create an intentional experience where we are being together intimately. I think it's about the intention of togetherness because you can be in the same room with people.
Yeah, proximity does not necessarily mean
intimacy.
Oh boy.
Ooh, took that to the next level. So I think their word of hygge is we're not only together physically, but we are together intimately and we are here to be present with each other, creating an experience of community and love and intimacy, which definitely I think Americans can use more of because you see what they're doing at night. And we've been here too. We have nights of this where you not only have the TV on, your iPad, your iPhone, and yeah, you're in the same room, but it's not hygge. You're not really together with each other.
Yeah, this is a really interesting one. Because it comes from a lot of small things that have been put in place as like habits over the years, right? It seems you can't just in one day create togetherness, especially if your kids are a lot older, there's going to be certain patterns. If you've been together with your partner for a long time, there's going to be certain patterns. There's going to be the dynamic of your low assertiveness, a low love tank, right? So you're not just going to magically create togetherness. It's going to be over some time. And I would say practicing the traits of reframing and empathy will lead to this togetherness. But from a larger perspective, people in Denmark in the families have this real sense of togetherness. And then now when they go out and interact with others, they also have this sense of togetherness with the people that they interact with. And that's a part of why I think their larger society has been so happy is primarily this togetherness. And if you think about this, it's happened, and it does happen for a lot of people on a very small basis, this togetherness, right?
Or like certain circumstances that like
very
make it.
Circumstantial. Two big ones, well, not as big, but sporting events. Right. So you can be a fan of one team, then you have the fans of the other team, right? And you could be sitting in a row with someone that's a total stranger they don't even have the same beliefs as you. They're
you don't even know
a different culture. You don't even know them. And if it was not the sporting event and they walk by you and bump you on the street, you might get all pissed off. But here, because they're wearing the same shirt of the same team as you could hug them, right? Your team scores a touchdown, let's say, and you jump on them and you hug them, right? So there's this togetherness feeling, and then it actually has happened, a few times over the years from a country perspective, and 9/11 is an example of that.
A crisis
in that moment, and they've studied this, the togetherness, the unity that existed within Americans had never been higher, right? Of course, really traumatic and sort of serious events were happening, but the togetherness went up like never before. Why? Because everyone identified as an American. And when we're all Americans, you were helping out someone that you didn't know, and it didn't matter because they were an American, you were an American.
Yeah.
Now, the problem is that doesn't last long here in America. And
probably
it's
anywhere, really.
Very circumstantial. Well, I would argue that it does happen in Denmark. And it's a part of why they are the happiest people, because they've intentionally created a expanded identity that creates this unity and overall togetherness.
And I think with this focus in Denmark on hygge, it's an intention and it's a focus. So the holidays are coming up, right? And in the US, everyone loves Thanksgiving and Christmas. And so you're probably making plans to be together. Now, again, you could be in the same home, but you could all be kind of doing your own thing. Like one person's super stressed trying to do all the cooking and then there's a game on. And so everyone's like just looking at the TV and the kids are doing their own thing. And yes, can that be beautiful and amazing? Yes. And what if you did bring more hygge to this? How can we, still have fun with the game and the food and all those things, but how could we create more hygge? Is it like, hey, I want to connect with these kids more, or I want to hug the people around me more? I think the intention is really big, and I think your connection will be more emotionally based. You could just be talking about, oh, how's work? Oh, it's good. That's not necessarily hygge. How are you? How's this really going for you? Asking better questions, more physical touch. So that's just an invitation, and I'm going to accept that invitation. It'll be good because we'll have a newborn that everyone can snuggle. So there'll be lots of hygge for this holiday season.
Well, of course, we've been talking about how to be the happiest couple, by looking at these traits of the happiest countries, in this case being Denmark, i.e. just Icelandic countries. But we wanted to bring each of those into specific maybe actions or specific takeaways for you as a partner and in your relationship. So is there anything you would say that specifically a couple can focus on to bring this hygge or this togetherness more into their relationship?
Well, I think even just looking at your upcoming weeks here and how you end the year is, where can you just create opportunities where it's just about being present and creating intimacy? And I think, again, just the intention of it. So look at your upcoming schedule, and do you have time set aside for this togetherness? As opposed to, oh, we have tons of gatherings and parties and we're having people over for dinner here and here. Really look like, but is this hygge? Is this really creating togetherness for us?
Yeah. Lastly, for me, just thinking of all three of these traits, you have the reframing, you have the empathy. I do believe that the more you practice both of those, that you will naturally cultivate this feeling of togetherness. And so if togetherness is really almost a reframing of your identity to not just be a sole individual, because that's what causes discontent and discord, is that when your partner's doing something to you, well, when they do something, it seems like they're doing it to you, right? That's the perspective. So you make it personal. It seems significant. It's emotional because you feel attacked. When you're reframing and using empathy, it should lead you to this togetherness where we're a couple. We're a team. And when something does happen, your immediate new perspective is, we're in this together. Right? And I think that's really where the togetherness leads you to.
I love that. Well, we hope you enjoyed today's episode. I mean, who's not up for more happiness? I think we all are, and genuine, authentic joy and happiness. So please do let us know if you are taking on these 3 traits. You can share a story and tag us on Instagram or send us a DM. We love hearing from you all. Make sure you register for those of you who are parents, whether you have young kiddos or teens. Go to onlinecouplesworkshops.com/parenting for the Amy McCready training on November 10th. And stay plugged in. We've got some surprise gifts coming for you here soon when we're off with baby Freeman. But we love you all, and we will talk to you on the next episode.